Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking on a topic that often feels shrouded in secrecy and misunderstanding: behavioral addictions. We've pulled together insights from, well, a foundational guide to healing from sex, porn, and love addiction, alongside some really fascinating research on the roots of these complex issues.
Exactly. And our mission here is really to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge. We want to help you understand not just what these addictions are, but why they manifest, how they impact lives and relationships, and maybe most importantly, how people find paths to healing. You might actually be surprised by the broad spectrum of behaviors that can become addictive and the surprising ways our brains play a role in all this.
Yeah, because when we hear addiction, I think most of us immediately think about substances, right? Drugs or alcohol. But our deep dive into this material really opens up a whole new landscape. What kind of behaviors are we talking about here that can become, well, addictive?
That's right. It's a much broader category than many people realize. Our material introduces us to love addiction, for example, which is defined as this compulsive search for romantic attachment, often, at the expense of someone's time, their health, money, even self-esteem.
Okay.
And then there's social media obsession. That's characterized by this relentless quest for friends or followers, for positive responses to posts, and maintaining a, quote, perfect online image, sometimes completely bypassing real-world relationships in the process.
Wow.
What's truly insightful here, I think, is realizing how deeply the compulsion for these attachments mirrors the brain's drive for substances. It activates similar pathways.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so digging into the core of our discussion today, what about sexual addiction? We're given a really striking example in our material, this young man named James, whose single source of distraction and emotional excitement seems to be porn and nothing but porn.
Yeah.
And even with his denial, it's identified as a primary symptom of his current problems.
Right. And it's crucial here to distinguish between casual engagement and actual addiction. Think of it this way. Plenty of people engage in what we might call non-intimate sexuality. Online porn, virtual sex, casual hookups, maybe out of curiosity or novelty, or doing big life changes like a divorce. It can be fascinating or even fun for some.
Mm-hmm.
The critical difference with addiction is when it becomes this compulsive, destructive pattern that really takes over your life.
Okay, so if it's not just a casual interest, what are the flashing red lights here? How does this compulsive pattern manifest in someone's daily life? What are the behavioral red flags our sources highlight?
Yeah, we see a few clear indicators. These include consistently being on the hunt for sexual activity, engaging in multiple affairs or maybe brief serial relationships, and ongoing involvement with sex-focused environments like, strip clubs or adult bookstores, places like that.
Okay. Beyond that, what else should someone be looking for? Are there other signs?
Yes, definitely. Other signs involve ongoing involvement with prostitution or, say, sensual massage, either hiring or providing. Also, a pattern of anonymous or casual hookups, whether they're met online or in person, and repeatedly engaging in unprotected sex, or sex with potentially dangerous people, or even in dangerous places.
That makes you wonder, does this always start small and then just spiral? What does our research show about how these behaviors tend to intensify over time?
Absolutely. The concept of escalation is really central to understanding behavioral addictions.
Yeah.
We hear about Janet, a married TV producer who started, innocently enough, just flirting on social media,
Okay.
but that quickly escalated. She met one or two men for coffee, had what she called a small affair. And before she knew it, she found herself having sex with 3 to 5 different men a month.
Wow. And it's not always about in-person encounters either, is it? The online aspect is huge now.
Precisely. Consider Jason, an electrician. He started using a hookup app after his wife's interest in sex waned. This wasn't just a one-off thing. It spiraled. He ended up having profiles on 5 different apps, neglecting his business, falling behind on mortgage payments, lying to his wife, and ultimately it led to divorce. Yet even after all that devastation, he still can't stay away from those apps.
That's powerful.
It just highlights that the media might change, online versus offline, but the compulsive pattern and the devastating consequences are often the same.
Okay, so we see this alarming escalation. It makes you wonder what's truly going on inside someone that pushes them into these destructive patterns. What are the core drivers?
That's a great question because it's rarely just about the behavior itself, is it? Our material breaks it down into common internal triggers. Things like an unmet need for validation or affection, unresolved resentments, loneliness, boredom, fear, anxiety, frustration, low self-esteem, shame, stress, feeling unappreciated, sadness, or grief. Essentially, any intense or uncomfortable emotion can act as a trigger for some people.
And are there external factors that can play a role too, beyond what's happening internally?
Yes, definitely. There are significant external triggers as well. These can include things like unstructured time alone, travel, especially traveling alone, relationship breakups, unexpected life changes like a new job or financial shifts, unexpected losses or tragedies. And here's a surprising one our source mentions. Even highly stimulating positive experiences like having a baby or getting a big promotion.
Really? Positive experiences.
Yeah, that's the counterintuitive insight, isn't it? Our brains can seek escape or regulation even from positive overwhelm, not just negative feelings.
Wow. Okay, so when someone is caught in this cycle, there's often this wall around them. Our material really emphasizes the insidious role of denial. How does it describe this internal state?
Yeah, denial is huge. Our deep dive reveals it as this incredible, intricate web of internal lies and self-deception. It's described as being like building a house of cards, but to the person experiencing the addiction, it feels as solid and protective as an impenetrable bomb shelter.
Mm.
Over time, individuals start to genuinely believe their own fabrications and fully expect others to believe them too. This makes even what seem like objectively crazy behaviors appear utterly reasonable in their own minds.
And this isn't static, is it? It sounds like the denial itself can get worse over time.
That's exactly right. This denial can escalate incrementally, often leading to, ruined relationships, careers, finances, even arrests sometimes. They often become effectively deaf to the complaints, concerns, and criticisms of those around them. It's an incredibly isolating and destructive cycle.
So what does that look like when someone's actually living it? Can you give us some of the real-world examples this material shares about how denial plays out?
Absolutely. It manifests in a few distinct ways, according to the source. First, there's justification. We hear about Daniela, a copywriter, who rationalizes by saying things like, this is what single girls do. It's exciting and distracting, and if some of those guys seem nice and want to come over for a quickie, well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, justifying it.
Then there's minimization. Sam, a salesman, claims, I'm no different than any other gay guy. All of us are on Grindr. Everybody does it. He's convinced he can handle himself and can tell when someone is too weird. He's downplaying the risks and the frequency.
Right, making it seem normal or insignificant.
Exactly. And finally, rationalization. Suzanne, a physician's assistant, explains away her online secret little intrigues by saying, I'm not having real affairs like some of the other women I know. No one gets hurt and nothing comes of it. She's creating logical-sounding reasons for illogical behavior.
It really sounds like this denial isn't just a symptom, it almost feeds the problem itself. Is that right?
Precisely. This entire web of deception, especially when family members get pulled into it, consciously or unconsciously, creates immense stress. And that stress itself becomes a primary trigger for the addictive cycle, directly fueling it. It's a really vicious circle.
It makes you wonder then, what are the fundamental drivers behind addiction in the first place? Is it something you're born with or something that develops through life experiences? What's the latest thinking on the nature versus nurture debate when it comes to addiction?
Yeah, that's the classic question, isn't it? Research suggests it's very much a mix. Somewhere between 40 and 70% of the risk for addiction seems to be genetic, and then 30 to 60% appears to be environmental.
So genetics plays a pretty big role.
It does. For example, adoption studies are quite telling. They highlight that children of alcoholics are much more likely to develop alcoholism themselves, even when they're raised in non-alcoholic adoptive families.
But environment isn't to be underestimated, right? Especially when we talk about early life experiences.
Not at all. Our material points out something really critical. Children who have been abused or neglected have an incredibly high risk for addiction later in life.
Yeah.
And this seems to be true often regardless of their specific genetic influences. The research suggests the more times a child is traumatized, the greater the likelihood of addiction showing up down the road.
And this connects to a truly fascinating, relatively new field called epigenetics. Our material mentions it reveals how our environment can actually alter or maybe even override our genetic predispositions. Can you give us an example of what that looks like?
Absolutely. It's a really hopeful area of research. Think of experiments with mice that have a gene linked to obesity and cancer. If the pregnant mice are fed certain dietary supplements, their offspring are actually less susceptible to these health issues, even though they still carry that specific gene.
Wow.
It's profound because it suggests that genetics may not be a person's absolute destiny. It opens up new avenues for prevention and potentially for combating addiction by influencing environmental factors.
That connection between childhood trauma and adult life symptoms, including addiction, it feels so strong, and the research really hammers that home.
It really does. Trauma is defined broadly as any event or experience, and this includes witnessing something that is physically or psychologically overwhelming to the individual involved.
Yeah.
It's a very subjective experience. What one person finds traumatic, another might not. Our material details various types. Impersonal trauma, like natural disasters. Interpersonal trauma, such as abuse or neglect. Identity-based trauma related to gender or ethnicity. And community trauma, maybe stemming from family or religious environments.
Engelplank's trauma.
Right. Complex trauma, which is trauma that's repeated and layered over time, especially in early family life, often called attachment trauma, that is highly correlated with all addictions, but particularly, it seems, with sex and love addiction.
Now, this whole landscape of addiction, it's been dramatically reshaped by technology, hasn't it? Our sources dig into how the digital age plays a massive role here.
Oh, it's been a complete game changer, absolutely. The online romance and sex scene didn't truly take flight until around 2009, with the advent of dating and hookup apps like Grindr.
Right.
Then Tinder followed in 2012, and the numbers are just staggering. By 2015, Tinder alone had more than 50 million users, and they were swiping at other members' profiles 1.5 billion times per day.
1.5 billion, that's hard to even comprehend.
It is, and it's only grown since then, of course.
Sure.
The sheer amount and variety of intensely sexually arousing imagery and activity now available via digital devices is virtually limitless. It's often free or very low cost, and it's accessible 24/7, 365. And this digital anonymity is especially appealing to cybersex addicts. It significantly reduces the risks of, arrest, shame, public embarrassment, and other real-world consequences compared to analog environments, which unfortunately makes discovery and intervention far harder.
Historically, when people thought of sex addiction, I think it was often perceived mainly as a male disorder. Has the digital age changed that perception, according to our material?
It really has. Prior to the internet, the sources confirmed that most self-identified sex addicts were indeed adult males. However, with this explosion of digital access, professionals have seen a corresponding increase in the number and variety of people who self-report struggling with sexual addiction. And that includes many more women.
Okay.
Yet, the material also notes that female sex addicts are often more difficult to diagnose and treat.
Why is that? What are the specific hurdles that make it harder to identify and help women struggling with this particular issue?
Well, our material outlines several factors. Women are generally less likely to openly present a full sexual history, often due to societal stigma and shame. Clinicians themselves can struggle to overcome their own cultural biases about women's sexuality, and many therapists, frankly, are just uncomfortable asking detailed questions, particularly if the therapist is male and the client is female.
So it's fair to say pornography isn't just a, quote, male concern anymore. It carries the same weight for women, too.
Absolutely. The material makes it very clear. Pornography presents the same concerns for women as for men. We're seeing more women using porn and also casual hookups as a way to self-medicate things like stress, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, or unresolved trauma.
And it's not exclusive to single women either, is it? We hear about Rita, whose story really brings that home. She's a 45-year-old restaurateur, married for over 20 years, who reluctantly admitted to her husband she had cheated with, quote, hundreds of men over the years.
That's a really powerful and sobering example. The sources outline key reasons women may engage in addictive sexual behaviors. These often include boredom and hole and loneliness, for instance, maybe when caring for young children or when spouses are absent for long periods. And intimacy disorders stemming from childhood trauma or sexual abuse are also significant drivers.
Right.
These women often seek emotional intensity rather than genuine relationship intimacy. They might use a constant stream of romantic and sexual activity to fulfill unmet emotional needs and, importantly, to avoid vulnerability.
Then there's the example of Sheila, a single 28-year-old computer technician. She dates constantly, has profiles on all sorts of dating and friend finder websites and apps, always looking for Mr. Right. But she consistently ends up with these emotionally intense, oftentimes highly sexual short-term liaisons where the passion dissipates nearly as quickly as it forms.
Sheila's story leads us directly to this concept called limerence. Limerence is essentially the emotional escape provided by that intense rush of first romance.
That initial high.
Exactly. It's a powerful neurochemical surge in the brain, primarily dopamine, but also oxytocin, adrenaline, serotonin. What's critical here is that this is the same basic neurobiological reaction evoked by addictive substances or other addictive behaviors. Our sources emphasize that the striatum, the brain's reward center most associated with addiction, is intensely stimulated during limerence. So love addicts in particular can get hooked on this initial intensity. They're constantly seeking new relationships to get that hit rather than moving towards the less intense but more stable phase of long-term intimacy. It's really an addiction to the feeling of falling in love, not necessarily to love itself.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, what happens when a partner is impacted by these behaviors? The betrayal here is often a silent one, isn't it? It might surprise you how often the betrayed spouse is the very last to know about the infidelity.
That's a very painful truth, yeah. Most sex addicts are, on the surface at least, relatively functional. They're maintaining jobs, even marriages, while keeping their problem hidden. And this hiding is often driven by profound shame. And loved ones often unconsciously look the other way or create excuses for unusual behaviors because, frankly, healthy spouses need to believe their significant other is trustworthy. It's hard to confront the alternative.
So if you're worried your partner may be an addict, what are the general signs to look for? Not just for sexual addiction, maybe, but for any kind of hidden addictive behavior.
A primary red flag for basically any addiction is deceitfulness. Active addicts are often described as excellent liars. They'll fib and make excuses with cold, calculated precision. And when they're confronted, the typical pattern is deny, justify, minimize, and externalize, placing the blame on others.
And for sexual addiction specifically, are there unique tells?
Yes. Look for sexual or romantic secrets. That's key. If they're caught, they typically attempt to cover it up with more lies. They might seem not to care about upsetting loved ones, which makes partners feel incredibly unimportant and disrespected.
Our material offers a really clear, powerful definition of sexual infidelity here. It emphasizes that it's the breaking of trust that occurs when sexual and/or romantic secrets are deliberately kept from one's primary intimate partner. And it includes both online and real-world activity, underscoring that it's really about violating mutually agreed-upon boundaries.
Exactly. And addicts often justify these hidden behaviors with familiar lies. You'll hear things like, what my partner doesn't know can't hurt him or her, or it's only online so I'm not really cheating. Some even claim everybody does this. It goes back to that minimization we talked about.
Right.
And in really heartbreaking cases, they might even rationalize it by saying something like, we don't really have a sex life anyway, so this actually keeps us together.
Oh, wow. But for the betrayed partner, the impact is just devastating. The numbers from a survey shared in our sources are truly stark, aren't they?
They really are. 87% of respondents said their partner's online sexual activity had a negative effect on their relationship. 41% called that effect significant, and 35% said it actually caused the relationship's demise.
That's over a third ending because of it?
Yeah, and the common effects reported included loss of relationship trust, loss of self-esteem, stress, anxiety, and a diminishment of the sexual relationship. As one respondent painfully put it, the online safe cheating feels just as dirty and filthy as the real-life cheating.
That really hits home.
It does. That sentiment cuts right to the core of it. The most painful part for betrayed partners is often not the extramarital sex itself, but the betrayal of relationship trust.
Yeah.
The lying, the secrets, the ongoing deceit.
Yeah.
This can be incredibly traumatic. It can lead to acute stress and anxiety symptoms, characteristic of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
And this trauma can manifest in some really intense ways, right? Even leading to behaviors that make sense in context, but maybe perpetuate the pain.
Absolutely. You often see what are called hypervigilant behaviors. Things like obsessively checking cell phone bills, wallets, computer files, phone apps, browser histories, and just being constantly easily triggered into mistrust. Understandably so.
And gaslighting, that's mentioned too.
Yes, and that's a particularly damaging form of deceit. Gaslighting is where the liar gradually escalates their falsehoods, making the victim question their own memory, their perception, even their sanity. This creates what the source calls a stress pileup, leading to anxiety, depression, shame, and those PTSD symptoms. It's often more emotionally damaging than the hidden behavior itself because it fundamentally erodes a person's grip on their own reality.
So if you are a betrayed partner listening to this, our material offers some immediate critical advice. What are the crucial first steps someone should consider taking?
Okay, this is really important practical advice. First, get tested for STDs immediately. Protect your physical health. Second, do not try to use sex to fix the problem. The source calls this a form of mutual denial, and it won't lead to real healing. Third, do not go looking for revenge sex. That usually just causes more pain. Fourth, Avoid making threats you don't actually intend to carry out. Empty threats undermine your position. And maybe most importantly, reach out for support. Get information, get advice from trusted professionals, therapists, or support groups. Don't go through it alone.
That's vital advice. Now, shifting focus to the addict themselves,
hmm
what does recovery actually mean in this context? It's not a cure, is it? That's made clear.
That's a vital clarification, yes.
Mhm.
Addiction cannot be cured in the traditional sense. The goal is achieving healthy long-term remission from what is essentially a chronic symptom or problem. And this requires a lifelong effort, very much like managing a chronic condition such as diabetes. It needs ongoing attention.
A crucial tool highlighted in our material for this is creating a sexual sobriety plan, which essentially works as a sexual boundary plan. How does that work, especially with these different levels, inner, middle, and outer boundaries?
Right, it's a highly structured approach that gives concrete steps. It
Mhm.
starts with listing your goals, your core reasons for wanting to change. Then you define an inner boundary. These are your bottom line sexual behaviors to stop completely. For example, looking at and masturbating to pornography of any kind, absolute stops.
Right. The non-negotiables.
Exactly.
Mm.
Then the middle boundary focuses on warning signs and slippery situations. These are things that might trigger a return to those inner boundary activities. An example might be keeping secrets from anyone, especially my spouse, recognizing the danger zones.
Mm.
And finally, an outer boundary lists healthy behaviors and activities. These are the positive actions that lead toward your long-term goals. Things like spend more time with my friends and family, or engaging in hobbies, exercise, therapy, meetings, the pro-recovery actions.
Beyond the plan itself, what are the concrete, practical steps someone needs to take day to day to achieve and maintain sobriety?
Yeah, the plan needs action. So practical steps include things like deleting all addiction-related digital files, photos, videos, contacts, canceling any related memberships or subscriptions, and committing to stay away from those gray area activities that might trigger acting out. The source gives examples like a Victoria's Secret catalog on the coffee table, or watching NC-17 movies, things that might seem harmless but could lead back.
And what about using technology itself? Can that be part of the solution, not just the problem?
Absolutely, that's a key part of modern recovery. Other steps involve using digital devices only in public spaces within the home where others can see you, reducing secrecy, creating visual and auditory reminders of what you stand to lose, maybe using pictures of your spouse or kids as background images on your phone or computer, and importantly, installing accountability software, parental control software, essentially for filtering, blocking, tracking, and sending reports to an accountability partner.
Recovery isn't just an individual journey, though, especially when trust has been broken. How do relationships begin to rebuild after such profound betrayal? It must be incredibly complex and difficult.
It is incredibly complex. Rebuilding intimate relationships post-betrayal requires far more than just saying sorry or buying expensive gifts.
Right.
The person who acted out, the addict, must show demonstrable behavior change over time. They need to establish a new pattern of truth, actions, not just words.
Right.
Partners, on the other hand, need space and support to make sense of how they feel about themselves in light of what has happened, while simultaneously, potentially, becoming willing to in time trust the betrayer once again, or perhaps deciding not to. That's their choice.
And communication must be absolutely paramount here.
Yes, and specifically full disclosure. Our source stresses this. Partial disclosure, or finding out things bit by bit, just creates more suspicion, anger, and fear. It prolongs the trauma. And while the initial focus might rightly be on individual recovery work, couples eventually need to intentionally spend time together just having fun, rebuilding connection, not just focusing on the addiction 24/7. This helps them live in that outer boundary of recovery together, creating a new, healthier shared life.
It's also really important to acknowledge that this isn't always a straight line to recovery. Slips and relapse can happen. What are the warning signs our material points to for an impending slip?
Yes, recognizing these signs is crucial for preventing a full relapse. Our material details several. These include just thinking about acting out more often, entertaining those thoughts, making excuses for risky behavior like, oh, I need to stay late at the office to finish this important project, when you know being alone with the computer late at night is a danger zone for you. Setting up slippery situations like maybe deliberately going to a specific restaurant or area known for triggering behavior, like where prostitutes might be, minimizing the risk again, thinking, oh, I'm only looking at a little porn, it's not a big deal. And, crucially, ignoring feedback or concerns from supportive others, partners, therapists, sponsors. The key takeaway is that recovery is progress, not perfection. Understanding these signs helps you catch yourself and get back on track quickly.
And what about support systems? What resources are highlighted as being particularly vital for long-term recovery?
Support systems are incredibly vital, yes. Our material discusses 12-step groups like SAA or SLAA. It clarifies they are spiritual programs, but not necessarily religious, using terms like higher power, as we understand God, allowing for individual interpretation. They emphasize the role of a sponsor, a personal guide, usually of the same gender, who is sober themselves and has worked through the recovery steps. There are also faith-based support groups available for those who prefer a specific religious framework. These groups focus on shame reduction, peer support, accountability, and instilling hope, while ideally avoiding shaming practices.
Finally, the role of interventionists seems to evolve too. Our material notes they now often recognize addiction as a family disease.
Yes, that's a significant shift. Interventionists have become much more comprehensive. They often offer services that include care and support for the whole family, not just the identified addict, along with long-term follow-up. Their role isn't just about getting the addict to treatment, but ensuring they actually arrive and helping with crucial aftercare planning for that goal of lifelong remission. Because, again, the material is clear. There is no simple cure for addiction. It's about ongoing management.
Wow. We've covered a tremendous amount today. From, the nuanced definitions of behavioral addictions like love, social media, and sex addiction, to the insidious nature of denial, the complex interplay of genetics and trauma, and the profound impact these issues have on individuals and their relationships, especially in our increasingly digital world.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. The path to healing, as we've seen, is not simple, but it is deeply structured and supported, whether that's through personal boundary plans, professional therapy, community groups, or a combination. I think the core message is that understanding, honesty, and consistent effort can lead to long-term remission and ultimately healthier, more fulfilling lives.
So, thinking about everything we've explored today, what does this all mean for you, the listener? What's the final thought?
Well, perhaps understanding the subtle yet powerful ways denial operates not just in full-blown addiction, but maybe in smaller ways in everyday life might just be a key to unlocking hidden truths about ourselves and maybe our relationships too. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What secrets might we unwittingly be keeping from ourselves or even from those we care about most?